train cut through the dark countryside, its rhythmic clatter filling the near-empty cabin. Daniel Harper sat near the back, staring out the window at the endless night. He was exhausted, his mind clouded with worry. He had to get to Chicago. Fast. A woman sat across from him, her long dark hair falling over her face as she scrolled through her phone. Further down, an old man dozed, his hat slipping over his eyes. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then the doors at the far end of the cabin slid open. A man stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, and walked with purpose. His face was expressionless, his eyes scanning the cabin. Daniel stiffened. He recognized that look. A hunter searching for prey. Daniel turned away, keeping his head down. Had they found him already? The man walked slowly down the aisle, passing the woman, passing the old man. Then he stopped, right beside Daniel. "Excuse me," the man said. His voice was calm and polite. Too polite. "Is this seat taken?" Daniel forced himself to smile. "Go ahead." The man sat down. The train rumbled on. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy. Daniel could feel the man's eyes on him, studying him, measuring. Then the man reached into his coat. Daniel's pulse spiked. His fingers curled around the small knife in his pocket. If this was it, he wouldn't go down without a fight. The man pulled out a newspaper. Daniel exhaled slowly as the man unfolded it, casually scanning the headlines. His heart was still hammering. Maybe he was just being paranoid. Then the man spoke again. "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Harper." Daniel froze. The man folded the newspaper neatly, setting it on his lap. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." Daniel's grip tightened on the knife. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "Lying won't help you. You have 30 seconds to tell me where it is, or this train ride gets unpleasant." Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't fight here. Too many witnesses. He needed a way out. The train was approaching a tunnel. The lights inside flickered. In seconds, the cabin would be plunged into total darkness. Daniel made a choice. As the train entered the tunnel, the lights cut out. Pitch black. Now! Daniel moved, fast. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it sharply. A suppressed grunt of pain. The man reacted instantly, throwing an elbow. Daniel ducked, driving his knife into the man's shoulder. The train burst out of the tunnel. Light flooded the cabin. The man slumped, blood staining his coat. Daniel stood, breathing hard. The woman stared. The old man was now awake, eyes wide. The train was slowing. A station ahead. Daniel grabbed his bag and ran for the door. As he stepped onto the platform, he turned back. The man was still slumped in the seat, eyes filled with quiet rage. This wasn't over. Not even close. Daniel disappeared into the city. Daniel moved quickly through the train station, blending into the late-night crowd. His pulse still pounded in his ears. He had stabbed the man, but he knew that wouldn't stop him for long. Whoever he wasn't just some hired thug. He was a professional. And professionals don't quit. Daniel needed to disappear. Now. He ducked into the nearest restroom, shoving into a stall and locking the door behind him. His hands trembled as he pulled off his jacket, wiping the blood from his knife. The wound he'd given the man wasn't fatal, but it sent a message. Back off. But they wouldn't. They never did. Daniel reached into his bag, pulling out his burner phone. He had one chance to get ahead of this. He dialed the only number that mattered. The line rang once, twice. A voice answered. "You're late." Daniel exhaled. "Change of plans. They found me." A pause. Then, "How bad?" Daniel peeked under the stall door. No feet in sight. He lowered his voice. "Bad. One of them was on the train. I put him down, but he'll get back up, and he won't be alone." "You still have it?" Daniel's fingers brushed against the small flash drive in his pocket. The reason all of this was happening. "Yeah," he said, "but I won't if I don't move now." The voice on the line sighed. Chicago's too hot. Get to the fallback point. 219 West Monroe, third floor. Got it, Daniel said. One more thing, the voice added. If they found you that fast, someone sold you out. Daniel clenched his jaw. He already knew that. The line went dead. Daniel shoved the phone back into his bag, took one last breath, then stepped out of the stall. He washed the blood off his hands, pulled his jacket tighter to hide the stains, and walked out of the restroom. As he entered the terminal, his instincts flared. Someone was watching him. Eyes, too many eyes. Then he saw them. Two men near the exit. Suits, military posture, no luggage, no reason to be here. They weren't just watching. They were waiting. Daniel turned away, walking briskly in the opposite direction. He kept his pace steady, his breath controlled. The moment he ran, they'd know. He spotted a taxi stand outside. If he could just a hand clamped onto his shoulder. Daniel reacted on instinct. He grabbed the wrist, twisted hard, and threw an elbow. A grunt of pain. The man staggered back. Not a suit, someone else. Daniel turned, ready to fight, and froze. And it was a woman. Late 20s, blonde hair tied back, sharp blue eyes that flickered with both annoyance and something else. Familiarity. Jesus, Daniel, she hissed. You still hit first and ask later? Daniel's stomach dropped. Lena? She gave a tight smirk. Nice to see you too. Then she grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the crowd. Behind them, the two suits spotted the commotion. One raised a radio to his mouth. They had seconds. Daniel didn't fight her. Not yet. As they weaved through the terminal, Daniel hissed. What the hell are you doing here? Saving your ass, she shot back. Now shut up and move. She dragged him towards an emergency exit door. A keypad blinked red beside it, locked. Lena pulled out a small device and pressed it against the panel. Beep. The lock clicked open. She shoved him through and slammed the door behind them. They were in a maintenance corridor now. Dim lights, the faint hum of machinery, the smell of dust and oil. Daniel turned on her. Start talking. Lena folded her arms. You're in deep, Harper. You think you can take on these people alone? Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't need your help. Yeah? She stepped closer. Then why are you bleeding? Daniel glanced down. His shirt was damp with red. The fight on the train. He hadn't even realized. Lena sighed. Look, I know about the drive. Daniel's fist clenched. How? Because I was sent to retrieve it. Silence him. A cold knot twisted in Daniel's stomach. You're working for them? Lena met his gaze. No, I'm working for someone who wants them taken down. Daniel studied her, searching for a lie. He didn't find one. She sighed. Daniel, I know you don't trust me, but if you want to get out of this alive, you need to listen. Daniel glanced back toward the exit door. Footsteps, getting closer. Lena leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. You have one chance. Come with me or die here. Daniel took a slow breath. Then he made his choice. Let's go. Lena nodded. Good, because we're running out of time. She grabbed his hand, and together they ran into the night. Daniel and Lena sprinted through the maintenance corridor, their footsteps echoing against the cold concrete walls. Behind them, the emergency exit door slammed open. They were coming. Lena glanced back. Faster! Daniel gritted his teeth. Not all of us were trained for this. Lena smirked. That's your fault. They burst out of the corridor into a dimly lit loading bay. The air smelled like gasoline and damp asphalt. A few trucks were parked nearby, their drivers nowhere in sight. Lena pointed to a black sedan at the far end. That's our ride. Daniel frowned. Hot-wired? She rolled her eyes. It's mine. Get in. They sprinted for the car. Behind them, the men in suits poured into the loading bay, weapons drawn. Down, Lena shouted. Crack, crack. Bullets ricocheted off the pavement as Lena yanked open the driver's door and slid in. Daniel dove into the passenger seat. Vroom! The tires screeched as Lena slammed the gas. The sedan peeled out of the lot. bullets chasing after them. Daniel twisted in his seat, watching the men shrink in the distance. You have a plan, or are we just making this up as we go? He asked. Lena kept her eyes on the road. Both. Daniel exhaled sharply. That's comforting. Lena smirked. Relax, Harper. We're not dead yet. The sedan sped down an empty highway, city lights glowing in the distance. Daniel pressed a makeshift bandage against his side, wincing. Lena glanced at him. You're lucky, that's just a graze. Daniel scoffed. Feels worse. Lena reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a first aid kit. Move your hand. He hesitated, but let her patch him up. After a moment, he muttered, I thought you were dead. Lena paused, then resumed dressing the wound. Yeah, well, you know how it is. Daniel studied her. Do I? Lena sighed. Things got complicated. He scoffed. That's one way to put it. Lena finished wrapping the bandage and tossed the kit aside. Look, I know you have questions, but right now staying alive is a priority. Daniel sighed. Fine. Where are we going? Lena's expression hardened. To meet someone who can help. Who? She hesitated. An old friend. Someone who wants to bring these bastards down as much as we do. Daniel narrowed his eyes. You sure we can trust them? Lena glanced at him. I was about to ask you the same thing. Silence. Then, Daniel exhaled. Guess we'll find out. Lena nodded. Yeah, we will. The city loomed ahead. And somewhere in its shadows, answers waited. The sedan weaved through the city streets, slipping into the darker, quieter parts of town. Neon signs flickered overhead, casting strange glows onto the cracked pavement. Daniel sat stiffly in the passenger seat, his fingers drumming against his knee. So this old friend of yours, how do you know they won't sell us out? Lena kept her hand steady on the wheel. Because if they wanted me dead, I wouldn't be driving this car. Daniel sighed, reassuring. Lena turned onto a deserted street and pulled into a rundown parking lot. A single light flickered above a steel door. A figure stood outside, arms crossed. Daniel squinted. That our guy? Lena killed the engine. Yeah, try not to piss him off. Daniel raised a brow. That bad? Lena smirked. Let's just say he's not big on small talk. They stepped out. The man waiting for them was tall, lean, and built like someone who'd seen more fights than peaceful days. His dark eyes flicked between them, then settled on Lena. You're late, he said. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. Lena shrugged. Traffic. The man's gaze slid to Daniel. And him? Lena crossed her arms. He's with me. The man studied Daniel, then nodded. Inside, now. Daniel exchanged a look with Lena before following them through the steel door. The room was small and dimly lit. Old maps and notes covered the walls. A laptop sat on a wooden table, next to a half-empty glass of whiskey. The man leaned against the table, arms crossed. You're in deep, Lena. Lena smirked. Not the first time. The man shook his head. This is different. You know who you're dealing with? Daniel finally spoke. The people who tried to kill us. That's a good start. The man turned to him. You don't even know the half of it. Lena's expression darkened. Then tell us, Mark. Mark exhaled, rubbing his jaw. The men chasing you? They're not just a cartel, not just some rogue agency. He leaned forward. They're ghosts, people who don't exist, working for someone who never leaves a trace. Daniel frowned. And they want us dead because... Mark gestured to Lena. Because she got too close to something she shouldn't have. Lena didn't blink. I need names. Mark hesitated, then reached for his laptop. He pulled up a grainy surveillance photo. Recognize him? Daniel and Lena leaned in. The man in the image was older and dressed in a sharp suit. His face was calm and calculated. Lena's jaw tightened. That's Mason Reed. Daniel glanced at her. Who? Lena's voice was quiet but firm. The man who runs everything. The one pulling the strings. Daniel stared at the image. So what's the play? Mark looked at Lena. You want to do this? Lena didn't hesitate. I didn't come this far to run. Mark nodded slowly. Then we take the fight to them. Silence filled the room. Then Daniel smirked. Well, guess I picked the wrong night to retire. Mark tapped a few keys on his laptop, bringing up another screen filled with maps, coded messages, and surveillance images. A red dot blinked on one of the maps. Reed doesn't stay in one place for long, Mark said, but right now he's operating out of a secure facility on the outskirts of the city. Lena leaned in and scanning the screen. What kind of facility? Mark exhaled. Private security, high walls, armed guards. Entry points are limited, and once you're inside, there's no backup. Daniel crossed his arms. Sounds like a terrible idea. Lena smirked. Sounds like our only shot. Mark looked at her. You sure you want to do this? Lena's expression hardened. Reed is the reason I lost everything. If we don't stop him now, he won't stop hunting us. Mark nodded slowly. Then we need a plan. Mark pointed at the map. There's a supply truck that comes in every night at 2 a.m. It's the only vehicle that isn't heavily inspected. We get inside that truck, ride it through the gates. Daniel frowned. And then what? Walk in and ask nicely? Mark's mouth twitched. Something like that. He pulled open a drawer and slid 2 suppressed pistols across the table. You'll need these. Daniel picked one up, testing the weight. Been a while? Lena took hers without hesitation. Feels like home. Mark grabbed a third pistol for himself. Once we're in, we find Reed's office, get whatever intel we can, and shut this operation down. Daniel sighed. Right. Easy. Lena smirked. Wouldn't be fun if it was easy. The supply truck rumbled toward the gate. Inside, Lena, Daniel, and Mark crouched between crates, waiting. The engine slowed as the truck approached the checkpoint. A guard knocked on the driver's window. ID. The driver handed it over. The guard scanned it, then glanced at the truck. What's in the back? Just supplies, same as always. A pause. Then, all right, you're clear. The gate buzzed open, and the truck rolled inside. Lena exhaled. Showtime. Once the truck came to a stop, Mark cracked open the doors. They slipped out, sticking to the shadows. Armed guards patrolled the area. Mark whispered, Cameras on the north wall. We need to take out the security room first. Lena nodded. Let's move. They navigated the darkened corridors, avoiding patrols. When they reached the security room, Mark picked up the lock. The door swung open. Inside, a lone guard sat at the monitors. Lena moved fast, a sharp strike to the back of the head, and the guard crumpled. Mark took his seat and began tapping at the keyboard. Disabling cameras, now. Daniel kept watch at the door. How much time do we have? Mark glanced at the screen. Not long. Let's move. They made their way to Reed's office. Lena pushed the door open, gun raised. But the office was empty. Mark cursed. He knew we were coming. A slow clap echoed from behind them. They spun around. Mason Reed stood in the hallway, flanked by 6 armed men. You didn't think I'd make it that easy, did you? Reed smirked. Lena's grip tightened on her gun. Should have known you'd be a coward. Reed chuckled. Oh, I'm not the one trapped in a locked facility, outnumbered 6-3. Daniel exhaled. I hate when the bad guys make a good point. Reed stepped forward. I have an offer. Walk away and I'll let you live. Lena's finger hovered over the trigger. Not interested. Reed sighed. Shame. Then kill them. Gunfire erupted. Lena dove for cover. Daniel fired 2 quick shots, dropping 1 guard. Mark took down another. Reed disappeared into the hallway. Lena shouted, Go after him. I'll handle this. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Don't die. He and Mark sprinted after Reed. Lena reloaded. All right, she muttered. Let's dance. Lena ducked as bullets tore through the office walls. The remaining guards advanced, moving in formation. She clenched her jaw. She was outnumbered, but she wasn't outmatched. She counted 3, 1 reloading, 1 stepping forward, and 1 aiming directly at her. She moved. Rolling to the side, she fired 2 quick shots. One in the chest, one in the leg. The first guard went down. The second lunged at her, swinging the butt of his rifle. Lena ducked, twisting his arm and yanking him forward. He stumbled, and she slammed the barrel of her pistol against his head. He collapsed. The third hesitated. Big mistake. Lena shot him before he could react. He crumpled. She exhaled sharply, ears ringing from the gunfire. Then she turned and sprinted after Daniel and Mark. Daniel and Mark stormed through the hallway, chasing after Reed. Reed was fast, but fear made him reckless. He shoved a desk over behind him, trying to slow them down. Mark leaped over it. Daniel kicked it aside. "Stop running, Reed," Daniel yelled. Reed wasn't listening. He turned a corner and disappeared into a steel door. Mark skidded to a stop. "That's bad." Daniel tried the handle. Locked. Mark pointed at a keypad. "Biometric lock. Only Reed can open it." Daniel exhaled. "Then we go through the hard way." He stepped back and fired at the keypad. Sparks flew. The door clicked. Daniel kicked it open. Inside was a loading bay. A black SUV sat idling. Reed was already in the driver's seat. Daniel raised his gun. The tires screeched as Reed sped toward the exit. Mark cursed. "He's getting away!" Lena burst into the room, saw the situation, and didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rifle from one of the fallen guards, raised it to her shoulder, and aimed. One shot. Bang! The bullet punched through the SUV's front tire. The vehicle swerved violently, slammed into a concrete pillar, and stopped dead. Smoke curled from the hood. Reed coughed, struggling to open the door. Daniel stalked forward, yanking it open and dragging Reed out. He slammed him against the SUV. "You killed innocent people," Daniel growled. "You ruined lives." Reed smirked through bloody teeth. "You think taking me down will change anything?" Lena stepped beside Daniel. "No, but it'll feel good." Reed's smirk faltered. Mark clicked on his earpiece. "Police will be here in 5 minutes." Reed's eyes widened. "You called them?" Mark smirked. "They may be corrupt, but when they find you tied up with enough evidence to burn down half the city, they won't have a choice." Daniel tightened his grip. "Enjoy your time in a cage." Reed swallowed hard. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Lena leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. "Well, that was fun." Daniel glanced at her. "You and I have very different definitions of fun." Mark crossed his arms. "So what now?" Lena looked at the city skyline. "Reed's just one part of this. There's always another fight waiting." Daniel sighed. "Guess we better be ready." The sirens grew louder. But by the time the police arrived, Lena, Daniel, and Mark were gone. Subscribe for more stories. Like and click the notification button. And to